Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Paul Woblington. The gentleman across from me is Ian Boyd. And we want to welcome you to the Deep Dive and to Inside Texas Football, powered by InsideTexas.com. Now is a great time to join Inside Texas. But before you do that, we want you to like our video, subscribe to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, go ahead, give us a 5-star review and let the people know what you like about us. And if you want to go get the best Longhorn and, frankly, college football content that you can find, you can go and use promo code IT1 to get 2 months of InsideTexas.com for $1 American. What a deal. What a country, Ian Boyd. And when we're talking about dollar allocations, when we're talking about how you want to spend that hard-earned dollar or dollars, there's been some changes in college football that have made this issue all the more paramount. Because now you can do it legally, or mostly legally. And because of that, Ian and I wanted to talk to you, fine people, about creating a potential budget roster for a salary cap or for an informal salary cap. There are no official salary caps in college football, as Texas fans have found out recently in a couple of recruitments. But we want to talk about what would be a reasonable Texas roster budget, what that might look like, how we might want to allocate or apportion that. And then we'll shoot holes in each other's theories and our own theories and hopefully entertain you. And then we want to talk about some of the interesting tensions that are part of this, because your budget is not just about acquisition, it's also about retention. And those are actually very different things. And we'll talk about some of those subtleties. Ian, talk to us about a proposed Texas roster budget.
You know, I've been preparing for years for this.
It's been training.
Not even intentionally, but just with the different theories I've had about where you would want to allocate your resources and which positions you want to have real talent at versus which positions you can get by with good, developed, solid veterans who may or may not be like NFL caliber athletes. So, Mr. Producer, if you can give us the graphic. I have been saying for a long time that the positions that matter the most in college football games are wide receiver, offensive tackle, edge, defensive tackle, and cornerback. Because those are the spots where you just cannot get by if you don't have a pretty special, scarce kind of athlete in the position. If you don't have a really good offensive tackle, an older, smarter, big guy will do the job up until he faces an NFL edge. And then he's going to be one-on-one with somebody that he cannot keep up with. And the ramifications are your quarterback's unconscious, or he's fumbling, or he can't get set to throw the ball, etc. Edge, same deal in reverse. Wide receiver, I think wide receiver is the most impactful position in college football. I think in the NFL, it tilts more to the quarterback. But in the college, these quarterbacks are throwing to spots. They're throwing schemes that are designed to feed particular receivers. And if your receiver can get open reliably and get behind a defense, that's as good as it gets for building your offense around a single position. So you have to have great receiver play to dominate in college football. And to stop that, you want really good cornerbacks. Because again, it's a one-on-one battle. And if you have a guy that's limited athletically, there's no technique or scheme that's going to save him if the other guy is just as skilled and smart as he is, but is an NFL athlete instead of being a college athlete. So I built a budget in a column this week for how you might prioritize those positions with your money. And then I inserted the caveat that while I personally think that a lot of quarterbacks are much more fungible in college football than your average commentator will say, I recognize that it's tough to have a lot of turnover at quarterback because he knows your system. There are all sorts of intangibles where he's leading your team. And if you're just like booting them for a new guy all the time, that's going to have a lot of negative downstream effects on your team. And also, just coaches and athletic directors do not want instability at their most like public facing position. even if they could get away with it on the field, it just doesn't happen. So quarterbacks end up commanding an enormous chunk of college salary, even though I don't know if they really need to. Like in Matt Rule at Nebraska noted that he said at a press conference, if you want to go get a good starting quarterback in the transfer portal, the price starts at like $1 million a year. And I don't think he had any reason to mislead, right? So that gives you an idea of what it costs. And so I tried to build this budget for how you might value different positions with your NIL budget. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I know some people sort of rolled their eyes when Matt Rule said that, but then I was researching our opening opponent, Colorado State, and Jay Norvell, former Texas assistant, claimed that his starting quarterback, Brandon Fowler Nicolosi, the
Yeah.
freshman that Colorado State started last year, and he played pretty well. Texas product, of course, like every spread random quarterback you run into in college football, they're all from somewhere in Texas, some Dallas suburb.
Yeah.
He said he was offered $600,000 in the offseason to leave Colorado State. So if the Colorado State Ram quarterback is getting big offers, I think the $1 million offer thing that Rule talked about sounds plausible, and it's not crazy. So here's the thing that's interesting to me, though. So you're obviously just trying to show a methodology of allocation here and
Yeah.
what positions you value most. I don't know if you remember this. I used to play this game 15 years ago, and I do it periodically. I'll probably do it again on Inside Texas soon, where I would say, all right, you have 70 points on a 10-point scale
I do remember
for each
this.
individual player, and I want you to allocate this on the defense. So you're going to have one cornerback who's a 9, one safety, two safeties who are 5s, and then I want average linebackers, but I want a dominant D line, and you have to apportion. And the idea is that you have to make hard choices about resources. Now, the interesting thing about college football is the Georgias of the world are like, actually, we have a 90-point scale to distribute. Everyone else has a 70, and we're just going to put 8s and 9s everywhere. And the thought about this, though, is so what about wide receiver? You talked about the importance of that position in college football. Aren't there individual recruits who are potentially demanding half or more of the budget of your room?
As it would turn out.
Yeah. Well, and even before, right? So I guess the question is there's a big tension between acquisition and retention. And the thing that I pointed out, you and I talked about in a deep dive not long ago, is that defensive tackle and wide receiver are very important positions on your college football team. Agreed?
I think they are the two most important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the rub. Here's the paradox we have to get our minds around, the dichotomy. Defensive tackle and wide receiver have the highest bust rates for 4 and 5-star high school recruits. So people say, well, spend whatever you have to. Get the best. Well, that's actually not the most efficient apportionment necessarily because these guys have a high bust rate in acquisition. Here's the other part. You can acquire via 2 different mechanisms. You can acquire via high school recruiting. You can also acquire via the portal. So here's the other dichotomy. Proven quality wide receivers can be acquired quite easily in the portal, as Texas can attest. Proven high quality defensive tackles are very difficult to acquire in the portal, as Texas can also attest. So it makes tons of sense that when you get a defensive tackle and he looks like he's going to be awesome, and he's proven it on the field in college, retaining that defensive tackle and paying him is always a good idea. Fair?
Yes.
But that 5-star defensive tackle that you covet, who's demanding ungodly numbers that might blow your entire interior D-line budget, there's a high chance that he will bust. And I don't mean just like disappoint slightly. I mean spectacularly bust. So You also have some locker room management issues where guys who are starting for you are like, why is my NIL 1/5 of this incoming 5-star? And you could say, well, it's a market and markets bid and value things differently. And then the guy watches the dude come in overweight, won't do drills, and he transfers out and busts in 9 months. Not good for your locker room, as Mr. Jimbo Fisher could attest. So, what are we going to do with this budget idea, which is great on paper, but in the reality, all of these different pushes and pulls are thwarting our best intentions?
There's a really good corollary that I think people will understand, which is that in the NFL, you desperately want the star quarterback, right? When you have the Aaron Rodgers or the Josh Allen or the Patrick Mahomes, you're set. You're competitive all the time. If you use a first round draft pick on them, much of the time, you are throwing away your draft pick, your most valuable draft pick. And so it's like, well, don't do that. Just get them in the late rounds or get them in free agency. Okay. The really good quarterbacks are not routinely free agents and they're not routinely in the later rounds.
Tom Brady, Ian. Tom Brady. You could replicate that in every draft.
I mean, Drew Brees. I mean, there are a lot of guys that fit that bill, but you being the specific franchise or program that makes that work is, a long shot, right?
Well, so there are guys that fit that bill, including the great Joe Montana, right? The point is we forget all the guys that didn't pan, all the third rounders, fifth round. Like there's a graveyard of quarterbacks, and it's very substantial after the first round. And we just remember the outliers, right? So it's an interesting thing. Here is the thing, though, and why you are incentivized to take a quarterback in the first round, because they're on a salary cap and they're on a budget. They're on a fixed salary. So if the guy does hit, you are playing with house money. You're playing with a cheap Patrick Mahomes until he comes up on his contract. And then you have to move heaven and earth to keep him and retain him. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting tension. And so I'm going to offer something that might be controversial to most, which is because wide receivers, first of all, there's a lot of good wide receivers coming out of high school. And there's also a lot of good wide receivers who are actually then proven at the college level, right? So your risk in acquiring an Isaiah Bond is very small. We are pretty certain Isaiah Bond is going to come to Texas and play good football, right?
Yeah.
However, because of that abundance, my thought is I'm not sure you're particularly incentivized to pay for the acquisition of a high school receiver. And if you do, you better be damn sure that this guy's going to hit, because the opportunity cost of paying out for a high school wide receiver that doesn't hit, it's not just a one-off. You just wrecked entire portions of your other roster budget at other positions because you have to rob Peter to pay Paul. Unless we can get our roster budget up to $30 million, we can get, our 80-something equivalent of Phil Knight and, write huge checks. But, I think this is an interesting tension. And I think there's weird dichotomies here between acquisition and retention. Once Kelvin Banks is on your campus, you want to retain him badly. But acquiring him, he may not be as expensive as some other players. And that's interesting because probably you and I would both agree a Kelvin Banks is every bit as important or more important than a star wide receiver.
Well, yes. He's harder to find. I would definitely say that. His impact, I don't know if it's actually as great as a superstar wide receiver, but you have a lower floor if it doesn't pan out.
And I guess my larger point is the number of potential superstar wide receivers is much, much higher.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing you've got to keep in your mind, all these seemingly contradictory things of, boy, defensive tackles and wide receivers are really important. But also, if you get them from high school and they're highly ranked, they're the most likely two position groups of highly ranked positions to bust. So All right. So what about sort of star?
Well, let me say before we change gears on that note, there
Sure.
are there are two obvious strategies for talent acquisition right now in college football with NIL. One is you just blow out your NIL budget if you can, like Oregon, and you just outbid everybody, right? That's a lot of fans are complaining about Texas being unable to do that. They're like, why isn't Texas able to just outbid everyone? Why can they not match the success that like a Georgia or an Alabama or Ohio State is having? Well, I don't know that those schools have more budget than Texas, but what they can do is sell a track record of A, putting kids in the league, and B, retaining and compensating starters. So, like, it's a lot easier for Georgia to not have to match the highest bid, but say, you will get that money if you pan out at Georgia and you end up as a starter. And not only that, but we're going to develop you into a really good player. So if you come here and you end up as a starter, then don't worry about money. You're covered. And if you don't, well, not our problem, right? And they are able to make that pitch and get kids to come and not stress about if they get outbid for one player, it's like whatever. Everybody wants to come and be a Bulldog for the chance at the starting salary and for a chance at the NFL, right? Texas is still built. That's where Texas wants to be, but they are still building toward that with a proven track record of winning, putting kids in the NFL, delivering on NIL contracts, which we'll see if some of these other schools actually do, right?
Well, let's put a pin in that because I want to talk about that. Not only the Georgia example, but also fulfilling your actual NIL obligations, which the University of Florida apparently was not able to do with one Jaden Rashada. But you want to fulfill all your obligations when you're buying a house, and certainly budgeting is important. And that's why you want to go with our friend Gabe Winslow. He is outstanding at what he does. You can reach him at 832-557-1095. If you're buying a house this summer, you need the best possible team on your side. Interest rates are higher than they were a couple of years ago. You may have noticed. But if you've got a guy who's really sophisticated at what he does, has over 20 years in the industry, has a degree from the University of By God, Texas, and also has a degree, law degree from a top 20 law school, this is a guy who sees all the angles and operates at a much more sophisticated level than the average mortgage guy. Give Gabe a call and just find out why. Find out why he's sponsoring us and find out why so many people rave about his services. We've gotten tons of notes on Inside Texas and privately about people who just rave about him. Give him a call and find out why. Really good at what he does. I want to talk about the Georgia thing because actually we tend to think, oh, everyone's got an unlimited budget and they're not losing players and all that. Actually, Georgia's losing players. And
Yes.
so in the research for my preview, people probably don't realize that Georgia had a finalist for the Butkus Award in 2022, Jordan Demas Johnson, who was an outstanding linebacker. Like 6'1", 250, runs like a freaking deer and hits like a load of bricks. He portaled to Kentucky. You know why? Georgia couldn't pay him. And they liked the younger guy behind him. And they said, yeah, Demas Johnson is a better player. Yes, he would have a big impact for us. We got to make a decision here. And they let him portal to Kentucky. And people say, how could Georgia lose a player to Kentucky? Well, they just did. And this is what I'm trying to remind people is any sufficiently motivated team, forget Ohio State or Oregon. Hey, man, if Texas Tech gets their skirt blown up by a single player on our roster and they get really excited about him, they can go get him. And that's a weird reality for us to think of, but that is the reality of the new NIL. There's another thing you brought up I wanted to comment on, and I just blanked on it.
It's like Messi being in MLS, right? That happens in soccer all the time too. If somebody wants to pay a guy beyond, then he's willing. He doesn't have to play in the Premier League. He could go. Sorry, go ahead.
No, actually, I blanked. So you were buying me time there. You'd made another comment right before the ad read that I wanted to comment on, and I cannot remember what it was for all the life of me. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to mention that about that we're not the only team feeling these growing pains. And also, you are at the mercy of your dumbest competitor. So if someone says, I'll take Jaron Thompson, fine player, uh, he's played good football for Texas, probably has some physical limitations at safety that he's not going to be able to fully realize the position the way we want to reach the upside of our defense. However, would we have been fine with him coming back? Sure. But if Auburn wants to pay him a bunch, there's nothing we can do about that. He's gone. And you turn the page and you develop your next safety. So, that's the reality of this. And there's really not much you can do about it. That's not the best example because that was probably the best choice, not only for us, but also for Jaron and Auburn, by the way. I think every party benefited. But if someone gets a fixation on one of our marginal players, starters, and says, we're going to give you $800,000 to transfer to North Texas, whatever, he's gone. And there's nothing you can do about it. You're at the mercy of your dumbest competitor. There is no salary cap. So could there be a salary cap in college football? And what would be the enforcement mechanism of it?
So I think there is a salary cap coming for college football, and it might hit sooner than people think because the TV revenues are so vast. And every time issues come to court over paying players, the NCAA and the non-paying of players is
Loses.
destroyed.
Yeah. And they should.
For good reason, right? It's pretty. We can all think amateurism is awesome, but it just doesn't make any sense, right? Also, here's the other thing that some people have harped on, rightly so, which is that right now colleges, the universities, they sign these contracts, right? The SEC payout is like going to be like 60 million a year, 70 million a year. Is that right? For the TV rights. So every school in the SEC will be paid 60, 70 million dollars. And then who pays the players, Paul? The university?
Nope.
The donors.
Yeah.
Out of their own pockets, which they've been.
And as the product on the field gets better, what happens to the donors' ticket prices? What happens to your mandatory foundation contribution so you can keep your seat? Yeah, I mean, the universities have the sweetest deal you could fathom.
And that's where the limit is going to be found.
Yeah.
Which is that this all rests on, a lot of times, it rests on a few billionaire or millionaire donors who are going to reach their point where they're like, I love this, but this is not, I'm not going to pay anymore. And then the fans will all freak out, but the fans don't pay for this. When you're talking about an NIL budget of theoretical that I laid out of $15 million, that's not small dollar donations that are making up to me to that, Paul.
Surprisingly,
maybe a couple schools.
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly, if you do get everyone on board, it actually can be pretty substantial. And the important part of that is its consistency, right? So you're not relying on a series of one-offs. But yeah, you prefer to have Phil Knight writing you a $40 million check and saying, get after.
Every school, the budget over 10 million, I would go out on a limb without actually knowing that every school that has a budget that high has an enormous chunk of it coming from one or two or three guys.
I don't know. I'm not well versed enough in everyone's different situation to know.
Certainly, I mean, it's tricky with Texas because Texas has a gazillion big fish. But anyway, the way it's going to go is that there's going to have to be a collective bargaining agreement on how much of the TV revenue actually goes to the players. And Congress may make a ruling on this, or the schools may just have to figure it out on their own. They will do what they can to protect the universities, most likely. But the big donors are going to be all aboard for not having to foot the entire bill. and the law is going to be on the side of the players. So you can just see where this is going to go, right? It's going to end up where you have these payouts and there's going to be some kind of salary cap based on what the player's share of the revenue is, right? Then there's NIL is still going to be legal.
That's the point I wanted to address, and where Texas does have an advantage. Because
yeah, go ahead.
Well, because you're in Austin, it's cosmopolitan, it's digital. There's a lot of advertising, there's a lot of business opportunities. I'm pretty sure Quinn Ewers makes good money in real NIL, like Wranglers ads, etc. Arch Manning is going to do just fine. He probably doesn't need $1 from the Texas One Foundation, but they're not unusual. Bijan Robinson. I mean, if you're a charismatic, telegenic player, you're going to have real NIL, like actual companies coming to you that have nothing to do with Texas or Texas alums. And that's where I think Texas can have an advantage over a lot of schools. That doesn't exist in Tuscaloosa. You're not going to get that in Baton Rouge in the same way. Yeah, the local used car dealer will say, "Come on out here, we're slashing prices," and you get a little payoff. That's very different from Dell taking an interest in you, something like that. So I do think that's important to consider. Any thoughts as we wrap this up, Ian? Any final closing thoughts? Because this is a pretty meaty topic.
Yeah, not to get too far downstream there, but that's gonna manifest in things like Texas spends the bulk of their TV revenue player pool on a position like defensive tackle, right? And then you tell a quarterback, we're not going to pay you that much at the TV deal, or we'll have a max contract or something. That'll be really interesting, is if there's max contracts, right? The big schools should push for a max contract so that the smaller school can't spend all of their TV revenues on a quarterback. Texas is like, oh, you can only pay the quarterback 10%, 12%, 20% of the allotment, right? And then they just come over the top and say, hey, NIL, you're going to make $5 million a year if you're the starting quarterback at the University of Texas. So there's a lot of ways this is going to shape out, and it's going to be very professional, and more of these deep dives, probably to the great delight of you and I, is going to be spent on these like managerial calculations on how to build a roster and how to spend money and where to find value in recruiting and things like that.
I'll say in closing, the analytical part of us will love that, but I can't speak for you. The non-analytical, pure fan part of me misses strolling to a Texas football game, walking on the field after as a kid, grabbing a player's helmet and shoulder pads and walking it to the locker room, which is something you used to be able to do. And you had a more authentic fan experience, and these weren't basically pro players playing college ball, right? So, yeah, I'm a little torn on both.
Still have high school football for a little, still going to be more pure for a little while longer, I think. So.
Wait till the Missouri NIL high school laws get passed in the state of Texas. It's coming. Wait till it hits junior high, Ian. All right. Well, with that daunting prospect looming in the horizon, let's enjoy college football as it is while we can. And you can do that at Inside Texas and here on this very channel. Like our video, subscribe, give us 5 stars on iTunes or Spotify. And of course, use promo code IT1 to get 2 months of Inside Texas for $1. It's a much better deal than trying to buy a defensive tackle. So for Ian Boyd, I am Paul Wadlington saying we'll see y'all next week.